Mike? Okay, yay. Good morning. Welcome to this Unitarian Universalist Church, which includes this congregation here in Birmingham and Tuscaloosa and the folks online. Hello, online folks. Our settled minister, Reverend Julie Conradi, is on sabbatical through mid-September. If you have any questions or need support, please check out the sabbatical brochure or reach out to some of the lay leadership or contact Reverend Ruth Ann Lillian, who is our sabbatical minister. For those in the room, please take a look at your connection card, your contact connection card. They put contact in here, I think it's connection, and fill it out on both sides. You can place it in the offering basket later or just hand it to an usher at the end. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are today on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. To all who are here this morning, welcome home. The prelude prepares us for worship. Okay, yes. Now, the lighting of the chalice. So please stand as you're willing and able. As Unitarians, we are people seeking truth, meaning, love, and deep connection. As we seek to discern our path, may we follow the guidance of our hearts. May our hearts be open to unexpected truths. May our chalice flame remind us to welcome all the truths of our lives. In the spirit of inclusivity, I can't say that word, inclusivity and welcome, please greet one another around you, especially if it's somebody you don't recognize.
So this morning, before we start with the opening song, I just wanted to introduce some people who are helping us with the choir today. You will notice that we're very loud and very strong, but in a wonderful way today. So some of you may have noticed that Bud Brown on guitar has joined us. He joined us last weekend. I knew him from previous choirs, so very happy to have him here. Yay. And then we have two visitors from out of town. One is one of my bestest friends ever, Alex Ryan, here in the alto section. She and I directed choirs in the same church at one point in time. And then we have Eric Kramer, who is from La Crosse, Wisconsin. And he's a member of a U fellowship in Wisconsin. So we're happy to have you here. Okay. All right. So go ahead, and Diane will be introducing the song. Everyone can rise.
Yeah, please rise and body your spirit for our opening hymn. It's 359 in the gray hymnal, When We Are Gathered.
those who love. We reach for those who love. Our youth shall pass, and time is wise, and countless seasons turn.
So day by day our years increase, until at last our life is our spirits sound like stars. Our spirits sound like stars.
In case you didn't catch that, I said, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Birmingham. My name is Kylie Kerr, and I told you my name sign, which is a K starting from my chin, going to my heart, because the deaf person who gave it to me told me I was very passionate and that I talked too much. And that is a direct quote, so as many of you know, that is very accurate. And then I said, July, the month, is what? And it's Disability Pride Month. Yes, thank you. It's Disability Pride Month. And I know there's a lot of questions about what does it mean to have pride in disability? Why does the disabled community have a flag? Which, if you didn't know, there is. And it's already gone through several iterations. The disabled community of the world is the majority minority. At any point, at any time in our lives, we can become disabled, or we can become disabled further if we already have a disability. 40% of Americans have a chronic illness, meaning something that may not be thought of in the general community as a disability, but it can be personally disabling to them. A disability is about how you interact with the world and about how it interacts back with you. So while many deaf individuals, especially capital D deaf, meaning they use sign language and are enmeshed in the deaf community, do not consider themselves disabled, they are found to be, as a community, the world is disabled to them because they cannot access so much of it. Now, in our Justice Committee Justice Minutes, we try to talk about actionable items. So beyond things like advocating for public transportation, which is a great universal design for all of us, and that this church, by supporting groups like Alabama Arise, is trying really hard to combat, by advocating for things like curb cuts, which not only helps a disabled person in a wheelchair, but also a mom or a dad with their stroller. Have you ever seen a mom taking several kids to the library and she's pulling a wagon? She needs a curb cut, okay? It's text-to-speech on your phone. It's closed captions on your TV. It's DEI programs in our schools. That is disability justice. Reproductive justice, environmental justice, racial justice is all disability justice. So what can we do now? We can continue to fight to allow DEI programs back in our local schools, back in our college programs, back in our organizations that we give our money to. There's a reason that Target just had its lowest profits of the last 15 years. It's because of a boycott after they rolled back their DEI programs. It's letting people in spaces like this, these third spaces outside of our jobs and our homes that we so desperately need, it's allowing them the opportunity to be authentically and fully themselves. It's making sure our aisles are wide enough. We have large print hymnals if you need them. We have assistive hearing devices. It is us looking at a community and saying, you are welcome, You are valid, and what you need, we will provide for you. You just have to be brave and ask, and that can be hard. But that's the pride of disability pride, is saying, I belong here, I'm welcome here, and thank you for having me here. Thank you.
She is so well-spoken, isn't she? Good morning. I'm Phil, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of this church. Our church is supported by those who call our church home and by those who support the efforts of our church to change our world for the better. If this is your first time with us, please pass the plate. We are just glad that you are here with us this morning. We share our cash plate every Sunday with organizations whose work reflects UU values to care for marginalized persons, advocate for real and systemic change, defend our environment, and promote justice and equity for all. Today, we are sharing our plate with the Alabama Interfaith Refugee Partnership, ALIRP. It is a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Birmingham, Alabama. ALIRP is a diverse coalition of community members, interfaith religious leaders, and lay persons, as well as representatives of other community groups, who have come together for the purpose of supporting refugees and asylum seekers through direct assistance, education, and advocacy. We appreciate your donations and accept the forms of payment found in your order of service. Thank you for your generous support of our church and our Share the Plate recipient. May we give in love, and may we give in hope.
Now is the time in our community where we share what we carry with us this day, joy or sorrow. For those of you online, please share yours in our online chat and remember to hold others by placing parentheses around their name. For those of you in person today, you're invited to come forward and drop a stone in honor or in memory of what's on your heart today. Please come forward. Today, we celebrate Sel Terrell on her news that her brother and partner are newly pregnant. Today, we lift up, today we lift up Tika, I hope I'm saying that right, Inake, and give them encouragement as they work through their dissertation. Today, we lift up Viana Wright's cousin, who is in heart failure. He was Viana's late husband's best friend. So may we keep each other in our hearts and minds in the spirit of community and love. Please join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation, followed by a moment of silence. Focus on your breathing. Just notice the soft rising and falling of your belly or the breath as it comes through your nostrils. Now be aware of your body. This bag of bones and water that carries you around. This body full of experiences, joys and sorrows. This body with the capacity to love, to laugh, to weep, to feel pain, to feel ecstasy. Love your body, Care for it as you would care for a child. Be aware of the tensions and the unspoken feelings stored in your body, and let yourself gently experience them and be comforted by the soft animal grace of your body. Just be with your body for a while. Now, become aware of your body's capacity for connection with others and the connection of the beauty of nature. Know that you are worthy of love. Your body is worthy of love. You are loved. Let's take a moment of silence together. Have a good day. Now, will the children come forward, please?
Good morning, friends. I don't know. Where is everyone else? Apparently, they're just going to hang out back there today, I guess. I know there's more of us here. I see one sitting over there. They're not coming. It's fine. We'll just do us then. That's fine. You get all my attention, Ren. There you go. Perfect. So I have a story to share this morning. Could you come this? No? Okay. I feel very silly because they're like all spread out. So not too far from here, kind of nestled between some whispering pines and some sparkling streams, lived a curious child named Bailey. Bailey was a part of a Unitarian Universalist congregation where every Sunday they lit a chalice and learned about kindness and justice and how everyone was interconnected like a giant web. Does that sound familiar? Sounds weird? I mean, I feel like it's kind of what we do here. Oh, okay, gotcha. It is a church, yeah. Like a church like ours. Bailey goes to a church like ours, basically. So Bailey also loved questions. I don't know anyone else who loves questions. That one. Big questions, little questions, silly questions, serious questions. And one Sunday morning, after lighting the chalice and singing Spirit of Life, we didn't sing Spirit of Life today, their religious educator, whose name was Sam, asked the children, "What do you think helps people live healthy, happy lives?" Do you have an idea, Ren, what helps people live happy, healthy lives? You don't know? What about you? Do you know what helps people live healthy, happy lives? Wow, this is very strange. Normally they have lots to say. Well, in this case, Ella said vegetables. Jordan said exercise. And love, added little Mia, hugging her teddy bear. Bailey raised their hand and said, "But what about doctors and science?" Interesting. "Wonderful," said Sam. "Science does help us understand our own bodies and how they work and how to care for one another. And doctors use that science to help heal people." And that week, Bailey could not stop thinking about that. At school, they read a book about Florence Nightingale and how she used observation and data to help improve hospitals. And they learned about how vaccines protect people from getting very, very sick. Does anybody here like to get vaccines? I actually do, because I don't want to get sick. So give me the shot. So I know, but it keeps you healthy. Bailey turned to their friend Leo and said, "Science is like a giant detective story, and there's clues that help us save lives." Cool. And that weekend, Bailey and their parents visited a community health fair. There were doctors and nurses giving checkups, scientists showing how germs spread, and even a robot that helped kids learn about the human heart. Bailey tried a stethoscope and listened to her dad's heartbeat. Lub-dub, they said, eyes wide open. It was like music, Bailey said. The nurse smiled at them. Every heartbeat is precious. That's why healthcare matters, because every person matters. And the next day, Bailey told her religious education class all about it. I think that being a Unitarian Universalist means believing in love and science, Because we can believe that every person is important, we need to make sure that everyone has doctors and medicine and the care that they need. So Sam nodded. Exactly, Bailey. We honor truth from many sources, including science. And we care for one another because we know that we are all connected. So Bailey smiled. And from that day on, Bailey started dreaming about becoming a scientist, or maybe even a doctor, or maybe both. Because in a world where everyone matters, helping others to stay healthy isn't just science, it's love in action. The end. Could you fabulous grown-ups sing us downstairs for some community time?
You guys are in for a treat today. You probably, all of you know our guest speaker, Andy Duxbury. He has been a vibrant member of this church for 25 years, next month, I think. He's originally from Seattle, Washington, and he spent his early career at UC Davis in Sacramento, where he discovered the fascinating world of geriatric medicine. And his first husband, Steve Spivey. Some of you might remember Steve. He later left the West Coast for the Deep South and the geriatrics faculty at the University of Alabama here in Birmingham, where he continues to teach and practice geriatric medicine. After the untimely death of his first husband, Steve, and shortly after moving to Alabama, he decided he was going to rebalance his life. He began a second career as a performer and picking up a second husband, Tommy Thompson. Tommy also died young, leading to an additional introspection and a third career as a writer. He continues to muddle through life in Birmingham with his two cats, Edward and Binks, a host of friends, and his trusty laptop. I just want to make a personal note. I've seen many of Andy's performances and his plays he's directed. I was lucky enough to be a stage manager last year, and I'm currently a stage manager for Richard II at the Bell Tower Players, opens August 7th. I read all 3 volumes of Accidental Plague Diaries that he wrote about the pandemic. Plus, I read his Substack, and it's always interesting. It's called Life, the University, the Universe, Life, the Universe, and Everything Else. Please welcome Andy Duxbury.
Good morning. I am Andrew Duxbury. Last time I checked. I've been a member of this congregation for 25 years, and when I'm not making good trouble around here or in a local theater, I'm a professor of clinical geriatrics at UAB. Somebody decided it was a good idea for me to speak from the pulpit today. So I've decided to speak about a world in which I've been steeped for more than 4 decades, the American healthcare system. To paraphrase Mark Twain, everyone complains about it, but no one does anything about it, despite becoming, as the kids like to say these days, problematic. So I thought I'd take a little time to examine what that's all about. I have entitled today's remarks, Moral Injury and Evil, American Healthcare. I did this because in the 4 decades that I've been part of the system, and I can't always tell if I'm part of the problem or part of the solution, I've noted certain issues and themes which violate the first rule of medical ethics, primum non nocere, first do no harm. These trends seem to be accelerating these days, driven by all sorts of forces far outside the control of any one individual. And in my case, they're driving me out the door. Earlier generations of physicians felt a calling to practice as long as they were physically and cognitively able. I can't do that. I was created by medical education for a different era of healthcare, and I find that I no longer fit. Trying to change to fit would violate some fundamental ethical codes. It's going to have to be a new generation that carries things forward, one trained for the times in which we find ourselves. If we're going to talk about what is moral and what is not, I suppose we better define what moral means. So I went to Google, that fount of all knowledge, and asked it to provide a definition. And here's what I got. Behavior and the goodness or badness of human character in holding or manifesting high principles for proper conduct. Sounds reasonable to me. I was raised by parents who had expectations that we would live upright lives. I wasn't beaten over the head with religion. I was raised Congregationalist, and our services were very similar to what we do here in UU, but we had a cross rather than a chalice at the front, and we talked about Jesus just a little bit more. But I was guided to be truthful to myself and others, to follow through on commitments, to share, to give others a hand up when I could, to do my best, and to learn from my failures rather than let them defeat me. By the time I was an adolescent, I had a strong moral code embedded through my personality. Sin was not what you did, it was the harm your choices caused to others. Well, hey, it was the 70s. There is a good deal of soul searching going on among the thinkers in the American healthcare system regarding moral injury among healthcare providers. It's been one of the main drivers that's causing workers to leave clinical care fields, and they are in droves. 20% of the workforce that was in clinical care at the beginning of 2020 no longer works there. The reasons for this are not strictly due to moral injury. The changes wrought by the pandemic are a more proximate cause, but the transgressions of various types keep piling on. Again, we should probably take a minute to make sure we're all using the same definition. Dr. Google says moral injury is a specific type of psychological harm that results from experiencing events that violate a person's deeply held moral beliefs and values. It can occur when someone perpetrates, witnesses, or fails to prevent actions that go against their own moral compass. This can lead to feelings of guilt, shame, anger, and a sense of betrayal, impacting their self-image, worldview, and sense of well-being. The last 5 years have seen a rise in bad behavior, an undermining of the scientific principles upon which American healthcare is built, a significant shift in the power structure away from the needs of patients to the needs of big data, and an out-of-control profit motive warping everyone's mission. Most practitioners would deny that they are agents of moral evil or that the American healthcare system exists for purposes other than good. Again, to make sure we're all using the same definition, Dr. Google says moral evil, in philosophical terms, refers to harm or suffering caused by the intentional actions or inactions of moral agents such as human beings. I would beg to differ somewhat. My personal ethical code, for instance, refuses to let me consider the effect a patient's treatment plan may have on my personal income. I have navigated this comfortably by making the decision early in my career to always work for salary. I've made a lot less money, but I can sleep at night. I give every patient the same care and attention, no matter what their financial means are. And I don't make decisions based on what it might mean financially for me or my employer. I know plenty of healthcare providers whose decisions are much more based around maximizing revenues and tricks of billing and deciding what is the minimum they can deliver and remain within terms of contract. There are also social moral evils, various isms, such as racism and sexism, which have dogged the healthcare system and which continue to cause inequities. The current presidential administration wishes to punish those who point this out. American healthcare is an odd amalgamation of scientific knowledge, historical accident, capitalism run amok, and a beleaguered allegiance to the past. No one sat down and planned it to be the way it is, even as we all despair and curse over its current structure and function. It was not conceived and constructed by idiots. It was put together over many generations by very smart people confronted with specific problems which needed to be solved. For the most part, their decisions defeated the issues that plagued their time, but they were unable to foresee and project what their solutions would do over the course of decades, especially when fossilized by commerce and custom. What we have now in this country is unique. There's no other system like it in the world in terms of structure, cost, and results. We continue to have a cultural belief in American exceptionalism in medicine, that we are cutting edge, that we can do things that can't be done elsewhere, that this is where the rich and the powerful of the world flock for treatment. And for years, there was fact and data to back up those beliefs. Unfortunately, we continue to carry them with us, inscribed in our cultural DNA, despite the world having changed significantly in recent years. We are the only developed country who ties healthcare to employment. It's a historical accident, but it reinforces the concept that those who are productive are deserving, and that those who are not productive are undeserving of health services. This false dichotomy rears its head in political discourse more times than I care to count, and has been particularly prevalent in the current budget discussions and the obfuscation of the very real cuts to public funding of healthcare. We put more money into our healthcare system than any other developed nation. Fully 16% of our GDP enters the healthcare sector of our economy. In the next highest, Switzerland, they spend 11% of its GDP. And most developed nations spend somewhere between 9 and 10%. We are an extreme outlier. One would think with that much money sloshing around the system that we'd be close to the top in terms of results. Wrong. Our life expectancy is amongst the lowest in the developed world. Our maternal mortality and infant mortality rates are very high, and in some of our poorer areas approach those of sub-Saharan Africa. When our health system is ranked against other world health systems on access, efficiency, and results, we usually end up somewhere between number 15 and number 45 on the list, depending on the exact measurement criteria. We're usually down around Slovenia and Costa Rica. Who's on top? Taiwan. As I said earlier, none of this was created with ill intent. To understand what happened and why, we have to dive back a bit into history, going back to the beginning of the 20th century and what was known as the Progressive Era. 19th century medicine, to our eyes, seems barbaric, relying on primitive surgical technique, a very poor understanding of hygiene, lack of anesthesia, and a medical education system that varied widely in its ability to train physicians. Some schools granted diplomas with no clinical experience or exposure to anatomy at all. Most medical treatment was delivered in the home by granny with the help of various patent medicines that were nostrums at best, poisons at worst. And they often contained significant amounts of alcohol or opioids, turning a large portion of the population into addicts. The political pressures that led to the creation of the Food and Drug Administration, public sanitation projects, and the clearing of tenement slums spilled over into the medical profession. In 1904, in a bid to prevent the federal regulation of the practice of medicine, the American Medical Association created a Council on Medical Education, determined to improve the standing of the profession, and hired the Carnegie Foundation to aid it in its quest. In 1910, Abraham Flexner, under the aegis of the Carnegie Foundation, produced a report on the state of medical education in the US. His report called for standardization of medical education based in medical science, the closure of schools that could not meet basic standards, and the selection of students based on demonstrated skills and aptitudes. Within the next decade or so, there was a major reduction and consolidation of US medical schools and a domination of the field by allopathic schools, those granted an MD degree and based on the disease model of acute care medicine. The Flexner report also emphasized that a physician was responsible for his patient and not for the community at large, leading to the split between medicine and public health, which continues to this day. Flexner's report, while protecting the public and laying the groundwork for licensure, board certification, and the specialization system that still prevails, had some inherent flaws. Like many things of its time, it was steeped in systemic racism, advocating that African American doctors should only treat African American patients and that the needs of that community were lesser. Most of the predominantly African American medical schools at the time did not have access to the resources necessary to bring themselves up to the new standards and subsequently closed, severely limiting the ability of minorities to enter the profession. The Flexner report also discounted the role of women in medicine and actively discouraged the admission of women to training, something that was not to change for more than 60 years. Medicine in this country very much came under the control of and was limited to WASP men, and the moral evils of racism and sexism were very much part of how the modern system was put together. Even the Jewish community was shut out, but they pooled their own resources and built their own parallel institutions, such as Mount Sinai and Beth Israel. As the first generation of newly trained physicians entered society in the years after World War I, America was still dubious regarding the medical profession. In the 1920s, the average household spent more on cosmetics than on healthcare, and most treatment was still happening within the family. The new medical schools needed patients to train their future doctors and nurses, and the economy of the Roaring '20s was leading them to expand their physical plants and to construct new hospital facilities. Advances in asepsis and anesthesia were creating significant improvements in surgery. In 1929, Baylor University in Dallas, Texas, built a new hospital to benefit its medical education programs, but they were having difficulty finding patients to admit. Justin Ford Kimball, then Baylor's vice president for health sciences, had a bright idea. He went to the Dallas Teachers Union and struck a deal. If the union would pay a flat fee monthly to Baylor for each of its members, then any member who became sick would be entitled to stay at the hospital and use Baylor's medical services free of additional charge. It was the first modern health insurance program. It eventually changed its name to Blue Cross. A few years later, everything changed. The US became involved in World War II. This cataclysmic event radically transformed the American healthcare system in a number of ways. First, an enormous number of American citizens were shipped out and put in harm's way, and some were killed, but even more were wounded or became ill from exposure to unfamiliar disease vectors and the rigors of warfare. More and more healthy young bodies with significant pathology returned to the US, allowing our medical system to study illness and pathology in great depth, and how our understanding became how to care, and our understanding of pathology and how to care for ill and wounded humans skyrocketed forward. This coincided with one of the great medical discoveries. Alexander Fleming had discovered the penicillium mold on oranges in the 1920s, and its antibiotic properties were known by 1930 when it was first used to treat an infection, conjunctivitis in newborns. There was a problem, however. The means to isolate the chemical, which we now call penicillin, from the mold and then produce it in quantity had not yet been figured out. This puzzle was cracked in the early 1940s, shortly before the US entered the war. This new miracle drug gave the US a new weapon in the war, which every army has faced since the beginning of time, that against wound infections. As it was of national security importance, research on antibiotics amped up, and by the mid-1940s, they were available not just to the military, but to civilians, causing a revolution in the perception of healthcare. Antibiotics, which initially needed to be administered intravenously and therefore required hospital care, led to more and more people whom loved ones would have witnessed dying at home just a few years earlier, going to the hospital and walking out. Our infrastructure, including our health system, was intact following the war, while that of most other developed countries was in ruins. We were able to get the jump on everyone else, and the idea of an American exceptionalism in medical care was born. And within a few short years, we had developed our current acute care hospital-centered system of providing care. In addition to this, the industrial economy was heating up. American factories needed to produce goods not just for the US, but for the world, suffering from 15 years of pent-up demand caused by the Depression and World War II. Jobs were plentiful and everyone was hiring. However, there were wage and price control laws on the books left over from the economic management of the Depression. These prevented employers from boosting salaries to attract talent, so they turned to other inducements, which became the benefits package. By 1947, the titans of industry turned to Congress and had the tax code rewritten to make it financially advantageous for employers to provide health insurance, and an employment-based system was born. It took root nowhere else. It was quickly realized that an employment-based system left out the post-employed and the unemployable. So steps were taken to create legislation which would provide a federal safety net for these individuals. Unfortunately, these attempts were branded as socialized medicine and ran into the Red Scare of the late 40s and early 50s and went nowhere. It wasn't until 1964 that the political moment became right, and under the Johnson administration, the major federal health and welfare programs such as Medicare and Medicaid became law. There was abundant opposition to these programs, led by the AMA, who believed firmly that inserting a federal dollar into the patient-physician dyad would add a third decision maker, causing problems for both sides. They hired an out-of-work movie actor to be their celebrity spokesperson for their campaign against Medicare, Ronald Reagan. He found he had a knack for politics. 15 years later, Reagan came to the presidency on a tide of government isn't the solution, it's the problem. His economic policies began a transfer of wealth upward and encouraged economic consolidation. Reaganomics hit medicine as much as any other sector. Before the creation of federal payment systems, medicine was primarily a small business operation. Physician practices were privately owned. Hospitals usually were owned and run by not-for-profit institutions of charitable mission, whether religious or secular. Medicine was by law and custom a not-for-profit enterprise, which existed for social good. In 1974, when Richard Nixon, at the behest of his old friend Charles Kaiser, signed the HMO Act, he opened the door for private enterprise to purchase and make profit from entities providing medical service. Reaganomics put this move on steroids, and by the mid-1980s, for-profit hospital chains and insurance companies began to dominate the market. Wall Street took notice of the amount of money that could be gleaned from the system. It came calling, and an earlier generation of clinicians sold out for personal profit. Since the 1990s, the trend has been continued consolidation, corporate ownership, additional layers of management, such as pharmacy benefit managers, which add complication but do little to actually improve healthcare. The rise of computers and AI has added a whole new set of complications as medicine as an entity increasingly reacts to aggregate big data and less to the needs of the individual. This has placed the physician in the midst of a moral dilemma. To whom does he or she owe allegiance, the patient or the paycheck? Our time is spent in data gathering and data entry. My day is becoming reminiscent of my very first job at age 15 when I was a data entry clerk and key punch operator. The computers track our every move. If we don't meet our metrics, we will be dismissed and replaced, allowing us to help no one. I didn't know I was spending 13 years in higher education to learn to type. Starting in 2020, it's all started to unravel. I call this the great undoing. It began, of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic. The lack of preparation, the neglect from the highest levels of government, the trauma of provision of care in impossible circumstances, the indifference of administrative layers safely cocooned in their working from home environments led to a wholesale rush for the exits from the older generation. Everyone is short-staffed. It takes more than a decade to train a doctor and almost as long to train a nurse practitioner. You can't replace the workforce with a couple of weekend seminars and some YouTube videos. Everyone has noted the inability to get appointments and the delays in care that have become commonplace. We want to help, but there's only so many of us left to go around. In addition to this past year has led to a presidential administration determined to bring down American medicine for political gain. The great institutions created from the ideals of American exceptionalism are being decimated. The research universities which create our knowledge and train our future providers are under attack and having their funds sharply curtailed. Those put in charge of our major health programs proudly advertise their ignorance of science, casting aspersions on centuries of learning. I am all for making America healthy again, but throwing out the last century and a half of medical advancement is not the best way to accomplish that goal. This leaves the average practitioner open to the death of 1,000 cuts of moral injury. On a daily basis, we must pay more attention to a machine than to our patient, constantly try to do more with less as the money in the system dries up, argue with clerks at insurance companies and pharmacy benefit management firms to try and get what we, with our many years of training and experience, know our patients need, but which keeps getting shut down by someone with a high school diploma and a company manual. Endure arguments from patients and families based not in science or logic, but on the latest misinformation advocated by media conglomerates or fueled by direct-to-consumer advertising. Try to bolster the morale of our colleagues who may be in a worse position than we're in, have to fill out the same form for the third time because an insurance company doesn't like our choice of wording. I mean, what part of both legs amputated don't they understand? And on it goes. These moral injuries, to me, have root in moral evils. What are they? The first comes out of the old adage, radix malorum est cupiditas. Greed is the root of all evil. I am not against capitalism, and I am not against making a profit. I am against the making of money to pay shareholders being the be-all and the end-all of such a vital part of our lives. There is a role for the federal government to manage important sectors of our economy so that they can exist and work for the entire population. A second moral evil is our construction of a system that exists to prevent care. The ubiquitous middlemen that are now part of every decision process need to be replaced with people who understand the nature of clinical medicine and the sacred bond that develops between patient and physician, which allows true healing to occur. Our third major moral evil is the rejection of knowledge, science, and fact for political expediency. This one's probably the easiest to deal with. Fact is fact, no matter how hard you deny it. And as will eventually happen when something arises to bite us all in the butt because we refuse to understand how nature works and our place within natural systems, we may quickly reverse course. So how do we fix this mess? It's fixable, but it's going to take a lot of political will and a certain amount of uniting of the country behind a movement to accomplish this. And our current politics don't allow for uniting over much of anything. If we eventually come around to an understanding that we are stronger together rather than on opposite sides of the football stadium, we may be able to take on some of these tasks. These include resource redirection away from administrative functions to clinical functions, a better understanding of morbidity and mortality so that we no longer hold impossible ideals like death is optional, creation of universal data systems so that information can be quickly shared throughout the system, development of single-payer mechanisms, and subsidization of medical and nursing students so they don't enter life with six-figure debts that require them to concentrate in higher reimbursement specialties. So, what comes next? I haven't a clue. Stay tuned. I'll probably write something about it eventually. There's only one thing of which I'm fairly certain. Retirement in 22 months, but who's counting? Thank you.
Okay, before our closing song, I just wanted to acknowledge anyone who may want to join the choir is definitely welcome. I'll tell you a little about the structure because I'm interim right now. We're kind of working on that. What we're looking forward to for August is that we will have 2 weekends where the choir is singing, which is August 10th and August 17th. And if you're interested in joining us, you definitely can. We have practices on the Wednesday night beforehand. And for people who can't make it on Wednesday, we usually make our music available to people so they can go before they come. And this is something that I'm working with Reverend Ruth to figure out what the structure will look like once Reverend Julie comes back, because that may change a little bit, right? But just to kind of set everyone's expectations. But we do appreciate, I appreciate the choir who's here. It's just a wonderful group of people. And so I'll continue to keep you updated on that. But certainly if you feel interested in joining, you can. So now we rise, everyone, for our closing song.
The hymn is number 1012, When I Am Frightened. When I am frightened, will you reassure me? When I am certain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong for me? Sing to me quietly. Will you share some of your stories with me? Wait, stop.
Everyone, in light of what's happening, let's go ahead and end the service. I'll make a couple of announcements real quick. One thing is EWIN is leaving us, and we have a collection. Yeah, next weekend, it's her last weekend. So we're taking up a collection, cash or check in the box in the narthex, or you can Zelle or Venmo the church and just put EWIN, Y-I-W-E-N. And it's only taken me as long as she's been here to learn to pronounce her name. Yeah. All right. So let's just go ahead and end. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. One thing I forgot, the decorating committee wanted me to say that all the art, this is your last chance. So please take a look.